Come on inside the Baker's Dozen restaurant where breakfast is served all day. When you're here, your family. And Cheaper by the Dozen, a Disney Plus exclusive from first-time director Gail Lerner. Well, first-time feature film director. She's directed some TV episodes and some shorts. And this comes to us from 3 writers. Yes, 3 writers, including Craig Titley, which is a last name I reacted to with the good taste and maturity you've all come to expect from me. He wrote Cheaper by the Dozen 1 and 2 with Steve Martin and also the live-action Scooby-Doo movie. And this has Gabrielle Union and Zach Braff coming together as 2 recently divorced people that had kids in their previous marriages, but they grew apart. And even though they're friends with their respective exes, they come together and they have kids of their own. And it's a diverse family with a whole bunch of crazy, kooky people. One child's in a wheelchair. One is nerdy, yet doesn't want to tell his sports like dad. One is really, really good at basketball, and there's twins, and there's other people. There's a bunch of loud noises because it's a really, really big family. Since it is called Cheaper by the Dozen, if you can't figure out how many kids are in the house, I can't really fucking help you. So this is a remake of a remake of a remake, and honestly, while Cheaper by the Dozen has never necessarily been the best movie, the original had some heart to it, and the one with Steve Martin actually wasn't all that bad. But see, it had Steve Martin in it. It also had some good direction, also had some pretty crisp writing, and this movie has none of that. In fact, I'm not going to lie to you, and maybe I'm too early in the review to say it, but I fucking hated this movie. Everybody was super annoying, really cliche, and since it was such a big family, and since they tried to tell a whole bunch of stories with, giving people different backgrounds and everything, like, oh, this person's struggling in school, this person likes this person, and they're trying to come up and hodgepodge all these stories together, you end up solving absolutely nothing. And any of the serious moments just get heaped onto you, and it's actually fucking infuriating watching anybody that could be good in this movie struggle with this really, really, really bad writing. I mean, 3 people writing this movie? By Christ, can you tell? Because none of the jokes land. None of them at all. Zach Braff has never exactly been the funniest guy to me. Scrubs, I know, has a cult following. I've never necessarily cared for it. Gabrielle Union is pretty funny and actually can do good in some serious roles. But then you have Paul Baker is Zach Braff. Zoe Baker is Gabrielle Union. And then you have Kate, Erica Christensen, that's kind of gained a second life being just a random character in all these random movies. She was in Traffic and also Swim Fan. And if you remember Swim Fan, well, it was funny to laugh at. That's about the extent of the positive Swim Fan provided. But Erica Christensen's actually not a bad actress. And you do get various people, you do get, various other characters in this. Some well-known, some whatever. This movie's a cliche-ridden mess. Like, from the word go, you just know that this is not going to be that great. But it somehow got more irritating and more irritating and more irritating as time went on. Because there were no stakes. It kind of reminded me about partway through of, like, that episode where Homer gets a really good goddamn job, and then the family says, Dad, we want to move back to Springfield. In fact, that pretty much dominates about the last half of this movie. I will do a spoiler section, but trust me, there's not a lot to spoil in this movie because nothing's shocking, nothing is nuts. You get the kids acting out a little bit, and since Kate and Paul are friends, and Kate is just she kind of just shows up at the house. Why did they give her a key? Who the hell knows? She just shows up, sleeps in their bed, eats their food. She seems to have her own job, I think. We never see her at it. But Paul and Zoe do have jobs. They came together and decided to, make a fancy restaurant. Terrible Prince impression there. But once an offer comes for them to basically get a big money deal and take a sauce brand that Paul invented worldwide, they have to decide what's more important, money or family. And then from there, you basically just have to endure a bunch of people acting awkwardly and not acting like actual humans, and everybody seems to be plucked from different movies. Some scenes seem to be taking place in different universes. Everybody will just be like, oh, I don't mind this, but actually, no, I've hated this thing the whole time. Okay, since they have so many characters and they try to go in so many different directions, but keep the family dynamic, they basically just smash everything together near the end, and it feels so forced and contrived and ridiculous, and any subplots never go anywhere. Everything about this, it's supposed to be an endearing family comedy with, the whole thing of like come together right now over me. No, basically you would need to come together regardless of whether you're blood or just by marriage. Blood and marriage. God, that would have helped this movie if we just turned all horror like. We could have gotten all. No, I'm just not going to say that right there. We just could have made a whole lot better if we made Cheaper by the Dozen a horror movie, because it's only horrifying in the fact that it is a remake of a movie. This remake has no right to exist. It limps along for an hour and 40 minutes. We do get we get a collage of the various people and the actors and stuff like that, and the kids playing them, and the teens playing the teens, and maybe the early 20-somethings playing teens. It's really hard to tell here. And we get a narration from Paul and Zoe describing what happened, and we get all this exposition heaped on us. Paul and Kate were happy; they had kids, they had their jobs, and they were raising kids, but they grew apart. And then he decided to buy a restaurant, basically because he was working in a crummy diner, but he was doing it to raise his family. And then we hear Zoe's backstory, how her ex-husband was a big football star, and then they grew apart, and now they're all together and whatever, and it's all happy. And then they get this deal to take the sauce brand worldwide, and they get this fancy house with this big old payment. It's seemingly a very large payment. It's like the Beverly Hillbillies, but for idiots, bigger idiots, which is saying something, because if you ever saw the cast of the Beverly Hillbillies, not exactly the smartest people, but that at least had life and energy. Not the movie, but the series. This has them move to a fancy house and everything, and Paul's having fun, despite the fact he's making deals with 2 Dana Brooke clones. Anybody who knows who the hell Dana Brooke is, you will perfectly understand. Like, seriously, it's actually stunning just how vapid these women act, which I know was the whole point. I actually don't know if these women are twins. I don't know if they actually are real human beings or just real dolls that were battery powered to about 25% to somewhat act a little bit human for like about 5 fucking seconds of any screen time that they got. But what basically happens is they have to learn family over money. And also there's this subplot with a kid named Seth that was Paul's sister's son that comes to live with them because she was in drug rehab. There's quite a bit of darkness about this stuff. Like, one kid was adopted into the family because the parents, who were best friends of both Kate and Paul, died in a car accident. Well, that's nice and inspiring. I mean, not that life is necessarily fair, but it's like, oh boy, that's something. So from here, Paul has to figure out what's important, money or family, and Zoe's at home raising the kids, and everybody's being stupid. There's romance sparking up between a couple of the older ones. And also, there's this thing about Seth. He may be stealing money from people. Maybe he's not. He may be stealing from the restaurant that they have. Maybe he's being nefarious and causing a bunch of break-ins in the neighborhood. We really find out all this stuff, and it gets wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow near the end, and it ends up solving nothing. This movie starts here and literally ends here. It doesn't accomplish anything. It has no right to exist. And while it is on Disney Plus, you can certainly watch it and not have to leave your goddamn house unless you're on a flight and you want to fall asleep, because I nearly fell asleep watching this goddamn tripe. It ends up just existing to exist, and ends up being a fucking terrible remake, terrible pseudo-sequel, reboot, whatever. I have no problem. If they want to do the diversity thing, that's cool, that's great. You got a girl in a wheelchair, you got various others, that's fine. And then they hit you over the head with the whole racial divide thing, which would be something good to expand on, but not in a movie like this, where it feels like they're just hitting you in the head with it. And they just do it on the surface. They don't actually allow for any deep discussion before instantly cutting back with bad comedy or, oh, I can explain this the way Zach Braff's character does. So really, that's all I have to say about the movie. It's not any good. Zach Braff is not funny. Nobody is funny in this. The kids are super annoying. I wanted to use a Ouija board to summon Chris Benoit's ghost, but you don't necessarily need to do that with a Ouija board. You don't need to touch a goddamn Ouija board. And that was really mean, because I'm sure these kids tried. But they were super annoying. Seriously, I don't think you understand how much I loathe children. I worked in a movie theater for a number of years and learned to really loathe children. Little Rugrats can piss the hell off. That being said, it is on Disney Plus if you want to watch it. there are certainly worse ones. This isn't as bad as Home Sweet Home Alone, but this is still pretty goddamn stupid. So now let's get into spoilers. Okay, so basically the whole thing is Zach Braff has to decide finally, after getting these restaurant chain ideas and taking his sauce nationwide and making a whole bunch of money and seemingly making enough to move into this rich house, this rich neighborhood. None of the kids like it. This one girl, the older girl that plays basketball, can't get on the goddamn team. She can't get off the bench because one of the rich girls got her dad donated and donated and built a gymnasium, or had the gymnasium built thanks to his donation, so his terrible daughter gets to play, such as The Life of Rich White Girls. And another kid from Gabrielle Union's ex, Dom, he's a bit nerdy and everything. He doesn't want to play sports. He falls for a goth girl. And then some other stuff happens. Harish kid from India, at least of India descent. He ended up kind of bonding with this kid, Seth, that was stealing money at first from because he has a troubled background. He stole money from the cash register, but then put it back when it turned out that he was actually, he could do some good and everything, and he has a heart of gold. Well, it turns out he was also saving up some money, other money that he had, to buy Harish some sneakers and help him out and stop him from being bullied. And sure, there are some good ideas here, but they're all thrown in a goddamn blender mixed with bullshit, and it's just, again, on the surface. And you can do something endearing while touching on some important stuff. Or you could do what this fucking movie does and just basically throw the ideas in there and just assume that people are going to like it. It just felt like they just threw a bunch of darts at a dartboard or at a piece of paper, like, with just various things. Oh, racial discrimination, this kind of stuff. And Gabrielle Union's character deals with that with this one woman, Anne, who ends up actually moving to Idaho because of the diversity. None of this is treated with anything except almost contempt. Even the director and, the writers, almost have contempt for this movie, and they were almost held at practically gunpoint to make it. Even the camera people, whatever, because it isn't well shot, it isn't well done. I'm sure everybody probably had a good time making it, and I'm probably just being a little bit mean towards this whole goddamn production because it was a fucking fiasco. It has no right to exist, it shouldn't fucking exist, and is fucking terrible, and Disney should be ashamed. But that being said, they got more money than about 15 federal governments, so they can just churn shit out like this, and idiots like me will watch and review it. Also, Kate ends up developing a romance with a guy that has birds, and then she does something called bird yoga as a way to make money. Everybody's happy and in relationships, and even though Dom and Paul try to come to blows, over racial discrimination, not that Paul was having that, but that Dom says, you don't know what my kids are going to go through, even though they're dead, this kind of stuff. He tries to maybe get for full custody, and that lasts for about 2 minutes, because who gives a shit? Seth disappears because he's accused of stealing money, but it turns out it's actually money sent from the state to cover the costs of and help whoever his guardians are take care of him. And that's why this money was in a little box. He wasn't actually stealing, even though we saw him steal before. Then he put it back. But then he escapes, and they have to do this big old monologue to get him back and everything. And now everybody's happy. Paul turns down the deal. Says, don't sue me, by the way, because I'm backing out immediately. I'm going to have my own restaurant with blackjack and hookers. Even though that would have been funny, they couldn't do that in a family movie. It's called Baker's Dozen, and they're all happy, and they got everybody's faces on the goddamn sauce, and everybody's happy, hunky-dory, and hunky-glory, and F, it gets a fucking F. Terrible. It's a terrible movie that has no right to exist. Anyway, agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.